بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا ما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. So, as we mentioned, we're basically breaking this kind of cursory reading of the book into 4 sections. It's really impossible. So, we kind of like touched upon some things yesterday, last week. We got a general idea. I think it was last week was quite good. This week is going to kind of be impossible, and also it's not really his book. So now he's going to go into more like the theology of the whole concept of theocracy, right? And the concept of religion and authority and the different things of that evolve in that exist in when you say a Muslim ruler, right? So we're going to skim through this, but it is useful. So he says the meaning of caliphate and imamate, right? So it says the royal authority implies a form of organization necessary to mankind. It requires superiority and force, right? This is a key concept in fiqh, right? Force. So in fiqh, we're not really interested in whether or not you have a moral right to rule others. Not really interested. Such that if you came in, killed everybody, and took charge, we will listen to you. That's not because what you did was right. It is because we need somebody in charge, right? So that they'll mention this. They say like, what if a rebel group, like talking about rebels as a rebels and things like ISIS or whatever. That's a topic in fiqh and it's been there for a long time. So some rebels take over an area and they have force, they have military control of an area, and then they appoint judges, and the judges make decisions. Is that meaningful or not meaningful? The answer is it's meaningful. Okay, why? Because every day you and I as people we need some higher authority to solve our problems. You can't have judgments just like pending forever, right? So that's the whole concept, right? And so there is a difference though between being voted in versus taking power. There is a slight difference, but essentially we are very pragmatic. We're like, I don't care about your moral life, and I don't care how you got into power. You are in power, please rule. That's the general Sunni approach. She is not like that, right? She is much more moral, right? You're not from Ahl Bayt, you're not righteous. Why are you doing that, right? So some Shia, if it has to be Ahl Bayt and upright, some of it no, it's from just Ahl Bayt, right? But it's a slightly different kind of way of looking at things. Um, okay. It is necessary to have a reference to ordained political norms which are accepted by the mass and whose laws it submits. The Persians and other nations have, they don't mention these things. This is because the purpose of human beings, is not only their worldly welfare. This entire world is trifling and futile. It ends in the death and annihilation. The purpose of humans is their religion, which leads to their happiness in the other world. Therefore, religious laws have as their purpose to cause them to follow a course in all their dealings with God and their fellow man. Right? So we have to basically guide people to be religious. Political laws consider only worldly interests. On the other hand, the intention of the Lord God giver, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has concerning mankind is their welfare in the other world. Therefore, it is necessary, as required by the religious law, to cause the mass, right, the people, to act in accordance with the religious laws in all their affairs touching both this world and the next. Now, that's not really necessarily true, right? So, to what extent does the Sharia, does the Sharia tell people, manage people religiously? It's not really in the way that you might imagine. So let's think about Malta. Okay, Malta. Malta was a dhimmi country. So the Muslims invited the Maltese Christians to become Muslim. They said no. So then they said, okay, then be a dhimmi state. Be a state that is a vassal state that pays tribute to the Muslims. So they said, okay, and that was it. So Maltese today, the language that's spoken in Malta, is like Arabic but with like Latin words. These were basically Christians who kind of spoke a funny Arabic. They had their own autonomy, everything. So there was no real moral commanding right and forbidding the wrong, and they're all Christian, and that's it. I don't know what percent of Malta is Muslim, you know? So that's on a very kind of like low level, is that like, okay, here's a country you have just accepted to not fight us, to pay a tax, and that we will defend you, and that's about it, right? So that's quite low level. That's one analysis, right? In terms of like political thing. Another one is like to what extent do you like force people to be religious, you know? So let's stories that we saw recently in Saudi kind of reflect the past. So the idea that, for example, in until recently, right, in Saudi, there'd be shops would be closed for prayer, and then the religious police would go around and tell everybody to go to the mosque, right? So you tell the religious police, oh, I'm just going to the bathroom. They're like, okay. Or you just stay in your shop where they can't see you. They're not going to come and open your shop and say, did you or did you not pray dhuhr? You know what I'm saying? Like they don't actually get involved in those things. So there's that. So we might get onto the talking about police. We may do that, but the police don't do that. You know, so like they don't get involved in people's moral lives. You drink at home, but and it doesn't become public. You commit zina at home, and it doesn't become public. That it's not going to be. That's not the role of the government. And in fact, as well concerning, and maybe Muhammad Sadiq can comment upon this, concerning the conversion in Central Asia, right? That basically conversion in Central Asia was discouraged because the Muslims went in and they had control. And then you have all of these Zoroastrians who are all paying tax, which is fantastic, right? Great revenue, right? Everyone's really happy. They're not fighting, they're not rebelling, they're just paying taxes, everyone's happy. And so, how is it that Central Asia became Muslim then? Central Asia became Muslim not through the conquest. The conquest controlled them, that's all. But rather through individuals giving da'wah, moral individuals going and giving da'wah to people. And people independently, irrespective of the rule of law, actually becoming Muslim. Such that now, for example, Central Asia is majority Muslim. But back in those days, it was not. Right? So that's an important thing to just note there. Allahu alam. Um, okay, that's kind of one thing. So now just quickly skip forward to 24. Difference of Muslim opinion concerning the laws and conditions of okay. Um, okay, so he's called the Khalifa or he's called the Imam, right? That's what we call him. The position of is a necessary one. The consensus of men around Muhammad sallallahu and the men of the second generation show that imamat, having a ruler, is necessary condition. It is word. It's this is fard kifaya. You can't not have a Muslim ruler, right? That's number one. Um, Now he's this is now a theological discussion. So when you say you cannot not have a ruler, does that mean that logic dictates that you have to have a ruler, or that revelation dictates it? Right? So there is a debate, right, in theology and usul fiqh, who defines morality, Allah or the mind, right? And somebody who wants to discuss this, they should look in the book what's it called? Hay ibn Yaqadhan, the story of Hay ibn Yaqadhan, the story of a boy who's born on an island and has a deer as for a mother, and then basically finds morality without revelation. Like that, it's a deep philosophical book from Muslim Spain, and written by Ibn Tufayl. But the premise, one of the many things it discusses is morality separate and and more important than revelation? And can we have can you be can you could you can morality be extracted and ascertained without revelation, right? And so here there's this debate. If Allah didn't tell us that we have to have a ruler, would we be obliged to have a ruler? Right? So the Mu'tazila said yes, it's logically necessary, and logically binding, and you would be sinful if you didn't have a Muslim ruler based on logic. Whereas the Sunni Muslims say no, it's not based on logic. I mean, obviously, logically you might see it, but logic doesn't tell you that it's binding. Allah tells you that it's binding. So that's a kind of theological discussion there. It's not really what we want to talk about here. Um, so we have to understand there's this. Okay, we're going to skip some of these things. Right. So here, people who have held that opinion include the Mu'tazila, the Mu'tazili, not the Mu'tazila, Al-Asam, and certain Kharijis. They think this necessary only to observe the religion. Okay. Um, okay. Okay. The religious law does not censure royal authority as such, and does not. It merely censures the evils resulting from it, such as tyranny. Okay, that's something else I'm going to skip here. Um, It is not possible to appoint two men in the position of imam at the same time. Religious scholars generally are of this opinion on the basis of certain traditions, right? Now, so that's theory, right? In theory, you can only have one Muslim ruler. In practice, we've had more than one Muslim ruler for the last 1,300 plus years, right? So Muslims have not been united for the last 1,300 years, right? Um, So there's actually debate here. Others hold that the prohibition of two imams applies only to two imams in one locality, right? So let's say, for example, the Muslims are divided, Central Asia and Spain. They're totally different places, right? Is that okay to have one Muslim ruler in Central Asia and one Muslim ruler in Spain? Yeah, why not? According to some, it's not as absolute as we might imagine. Okay, the prerequisites for governing for being the Khalifa are that you have knowledge, right? Because you have to understand that basically a Muslim ruler is the qadi. He's the same thing. So, like by default, there's no judges. He is the judge, right? That's the default. Probity, I'm not sure what he means here exactly, but I mean being basically upright. Competence, freedom of the senses, not having any problems, right? And there's other things there as well. So, in order to become the ruler, there's a bit more, but it's basically a judge. So when we talk about qada, we're going to say there's basically the conditions of being a judge, and then the conditions of being a ruler. Basically, being the ruler is a bit more. Okay, it's like a judge plus. So the default is the ruler is a judge. Okay, that's the default picture. Like Sayyidina Umar, he's a mufti, right? He gives fatwa, he says halal haram, right? That's the default structure there. So the necessity of knowledge, meaning sacred knowledge, is a prerequisite, obviously. The Imam can only execute the divine laws only if he knows them, right? So that's the whole idea. So you can, again, people look applying this to the Muslim world today, like, we have a problem, right? Like, are these all these Muslim rulers, are they all fuqaha and muftis and mujtahid imams, right? So he says, blind acceptance of tradition, taqleed. So he's saying, if you're not a mujtahid mutlaq, like if you're not like Imam Malik and Imam Shafi, you can't be the ruler. Because blind imitation, saying I'm going to do what he did because he was knowledgeable, that's a shortcoming, right? So it's a problem. So in principle, the Muslim ruler has to be a mujtahid mutlaq. Like he has all the necessary knowledge in order to work out halal and haram by himself without having to refer to other people. Right? And also the default is that's a condition for the judge. The judge, in principle, is not supposed to be Shafi'i or anything. He's supposed to be a mujtahid, right? And the default is that if we have judges under the Khalifa, everyone's going to have their own rule and different law. So there is no such thing as Islamic law as a united law, Saudi law, Egyptian law. So the Khalifa himself, his opinion may be that you can get married without the wali agreeing. But the qadi that he appoints disagrees with him. That's totally fine. And that every other day there's a different ruling in the court. That's totally fine. Okay? So in principle, that's the idea. That we don't just follow precedent, So therefore, there is no law of the country, right? You don't say, for example, this is Egyptian family law, and this is how it will work out, and this is what the judge has to do. No, you don't do that. The default is that you do the precedent is not binding, and rather the only thing that is binding is Quran and Sunnah, and he's going to do ijtihad. That's it. And so therefore, it may change from day to day. The Khalifa's law may change from day to day. Today, he allowed it. Tomorrow, he didn't. Right? Today, somebody was judged in this way. Tomorrow, something else. Right? And the same, and he may have one judgment, and his judges that he appoints have different ones. Right? And so there was a complaint. Right? This was a complaint put by a political figure called, and a political and a literary figure called Ibn al-Muqaffa. He's the author of Kalila wa Dimna, which is a kind of satirical political thing, stories. So he said, look, we live in Iraq, okay, in the 2nd century. There's tons of scholars, and these scholars are awesome. With all due respect, they're super amazing. No issues. I'm not saying that they're ignorant. I'm not saying that they're wrong. And I'm not saying that pluralism isn't good. But I am saying, that this is chaotic because basically in one side of the city you have one rule, and the other side of the city you have another rule. And in fact, there isn't a rule because each scholar may develop it as an opinion and might have a different opinion tomorrow. So this is a problem. We as a society forget the religious side of it, forget the moral side of it, forget the fact that Quran and Sunnah can be understood in more than one way. We as a people, and you as a governor, we should have something called a law. Okay, so there is a difference. There's many differences between a law and a fatwa. Okay, so fatwa plus force, meaning I can enforce it, is called qada. That's what a qadi does, so the judge does. But 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 fatwa plus force plus consistency is called a law. Okay, so it's not the same. So in principle, when you say Sharia law, what do you mean by that? Because conceptually, we don't believe that the ruler himself is bound by a law, meaning it may change. The Quran and Sunnah could be understood in more than one way, so he may change his opinion. And similarly, his judges may see things differently, right? And you can't say, yeah, but yesterday it was like this. That's not binding, right? That's not binding. You can't follow your own judgment yesterday if you have a new judgment today, nor can you follow someone else's if you're a mujtahid mutlaq. Right? Does that make sense? So this is quite important. The way we look at law, in the West you have the whole thing about precedent and consistency. That's very important. That came into Islam. That's true. Over time, you would be in Spain, and you would have the Amal of Valencia, right? Valencia, right? Valencia in Spain, right? You're in Valencia in Spain. This is what we do in Spain, and nobody can change it. And the ruler will not let you change it. And the ruler will appoint you as judge to abide by the Maliki school and abide by these certain positions. And if you didn't do that, your judgment doesn't count. Okay? That's what happened over time. That's true. But in principle, the Muslim ruler is supposed to be a mujtahid mutlaq, meaning he's not bound by precedent, and he's not following A or B, he's following his own opinion, and that may change. And the people that he appoints will not necessarily agree with him, okay? And they may change as well. So that would mean there's inconsistency, right? And changes, okay? And so in the fiqh world, that's fine. We have no problem with that. In the moral world, but the issue is politically, people didn't like that because people want consistency. So that essay is called Risalat al-Sahaba by Ibn Muqaffa, writing to I think it was Harun al-Rashid or something like that, saying, listen, bro, with all due respect, you actually need to stop these, like, too much pluralism is not good. Let that, that's not actually very good because so and so is going to say this is marriage and then it's not marriage, right? Like, how's it going to work? They're married, but they're not. How's that going to work? You know, this person should be executed. No, they shouldn't be executed, right? It can't be like that. We're going to have one thing, and eventually that's what happened, right? So you'd have like, consistency became something, right? Inshallah, that makes sense. Um, okay, we can skip all of these things. Now it says the prerequisite of being Qurashi, for example, this is according to the Shafis. The Shafis, they say if you just took over through a coup, that would count. But you can't vote in somebody who's not from Quraysh. So if we're going to do it the proper way, which is we're going to get the Muslims, we can have an assembly, we're all going to come together and say, everybody, all quote unquote important people, who do you think? So it's not democracy. What's it called, Muhammad Sadiq, when it's like just some people vote? Um, like there's a word for it, something. There's a word like it's a bit like Plato's view of it. Like it's not really everybody voting. I guess a republic, I guess maybe. But basically, so what we have in Islam is when you talk about democracy in Islam, it's called Ahlul Hilli wal Aqd, the people who can dissolve and combine. So you have the important people. If you can imagine, let's say the heads of the tribes, right? People who represent other people, they're going to come, and they will vote for somebody. Not everybody will vote, right? It is not democracy in the way that we see it, right? So that kind of person, for the Shafis, he has to be from Quraysh. You can't vote for a non-Qurayshi, right? However, um, but that's debated. Anyway, he mentions that discussion there. Something like that, wallahu alam. But the idea is like this, so that when we talk about democracy, is like, hang on a minute, I work on this land. I went to school in this country. I should be able to vote. That's not in principle. There's Muslim scholars talk about. They don't talk about that. So the idea, like, oh yeah, it's like democracy is not something that they would in the way that we see it. It's not something that they talk about. Um. Okay, the transformation of the caliphate into royal authority. Again, Brother Muhammad Sadiq can talk about this, extensively. But basically, what happened was you get this shift from Khalifa, meaning somebody who stands in the stead of the Prophet ﷺ in a religious and temporal way, right? Right, until you just become a king, right? We had kings. So the Prophet ﷺ said that. He said there will be khulafa and then there will be kings, meaning you're not morally in charge and you have the pomp of kings. And king in Arabic is related to ownership, like you own everything, right? As opposed to you're just a poor person like anybody else. The janitor, the khalifa, the surgeon, the mufti should be all on the same salary, right? You just, if you clean the streets, who's going to pay you? Well, you need somebody to pay you because right? So somebody has to pay you if you work clean the street. Somebody has to pay you if you're the Khalifa. Somebody has to pay you if you're the Quran teacher. Somebody has to pay you if you're the surgeon. And so there we go. Basically it's supported by the state, and that's it, right? No worries. So we can skip that. Um, okay. So anyway, so basically that's what happened historically. Is the we kind of fell into these things, right? I don't want to go. He's going to go into a long discussion. I want to skip a lot of these things. Transformation. So here, basically, what happened then is Sayyidina Bakr was voted in, Sayyidina Umar was voted in, Sayyidina Uthman was voted in, Sayyidina Ali was voted in. Okay, because what happened with Sayyidina Ali and what was happening before that, then Sayyidina Muawiyah was voted in. Well, basically, it was two contention, and then Sayyidina Muawiyah was voted in. But from Sayyidina Muawiyah down until the end of the Umayyads in the year 131, you get the Umayyads, meaning it's a dynasty. So that's what happened. And that's a problem, right? Suddenly, before you had people who were voted in based on their moral and political, merit. Now it's, well, you're my son, so you're in charge, you know, which is valid, but it's not very Islamic. So no, we don't have time. We don't have the ability to go through all of those things. So then the same thing happened with the Abbasids. So then you have this whole succession, etc. So then on 27, where's 27? So you have the oath of allegiance. Um, so here, for example, oath of allegiance. So Sayyidina Ali, he came into power, but he refused to have certain people brought to justice. So then people said, well, if you don't bring them to justice, we won't give you the oath of allegiance, right? So this is what happens when you become the Khalifa. All the quote unquote significant people give their bay'ah, they give their oath of allegiance, and now you're in charge, right? That's that basic picture there. And then succession, it can be through one of basically three ways. You either say voting, or you appoint somebody, as Muawiyah did. He said, my son's in charge. Or it could be also through coup d'etat, right? So this is what happened historically. Sayyidina Muawiyah, so there was two people voted in. Well, Sayyidina Ali was voted in. Sayyidina Muawiyah did not give him allegiance. The two fought. Sayyidina Ali was murdered by other people. So then basically the two contending parties, Sayyidina Muawiyah continued. Okay, Sayyidina Muawiyah then appointed his son. And they appointed his son. And then he appointed his son. Son goes in the family of the Umayyads. And then what happens? And then there was a coup d'etat from the east. The Abbasids came in and wiped them all out in 130. So now when the Abbasids come in, how did you come in? Did we vote for you? No. So how is it legitimate then? Well, you've taken over now. I don't really care whether it was moral or not, and who what you're gonna have to answer for on Judgment Day. That's your own problem. But the point is, you're in charge now. So a coup d'état is a valid way to get for a Muslim ruler to have moral and temporal authority, but that doesn't make it moral in itself. Okay, so now functions of religious institution. We're going to skip many of these things. So it goes to leading the prayer, right? So is that necessarily the office of the mufti? So by default, mufti is not an official thing. Okay, mufti is, you ask me a question, I give you an answer. That doesn't mean it's not an authority, or it's not, that's not an authority. It's not authority connected to the caliph. That's just, you know. However, judge is. So the difference between a qadi and a mufti is, a mufti gives you his opinion. You want to follow it, he follow it. Don't. It's up to you. And the qadi, you don't have a choice whether you want to follow it or not. So you and I have a financial discussion between us. We go to court, and the court goes in my favor or your favor. Whether I agree or disagree, it doesn't matter, right? So that's the qadi. The qadi solves issues, right? I give a fatwa that tomorrow's Ramadan, it doesn't mean anything. The qadi, the chief justice of appointed, so that here I'm in Malaysia. There's a chief, there's a king, current king of Malaysia. He appoints some religious figure to say it's Ramadan. Khalas, it's Ramadan, whether you like it or not, right? He says this is marriage, whether you like it or not. It's not marriage, whether you like it or not, right? This is divorce, whether you like it or not. That's the role of the judge, right? That's not the role of the mufti. The mufti, you don't want to listen to him. Don't listen to him. It's up to you. Right? So that's that there. That's the office of the mufti, the judge. So the judge is an extension. He's kind of an extension. He's like the veins of the ruler, right? Now we've got the police. Okay, so it says here in the Abbasid. So basically, the police did not exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, or for the first like 150 years, something like that. So it says in the Abbasid dynasty, in the dynasty of the and the dynasty of Ayyubids in Spain, right? So that was in Spain later on. The control of crimes and imposition of punishments required by the religious law was also a special task and delegated to the chief of police. So it's something called the hisbah, right? The hisbah. The police is another religious function under these dynasties belong to the positions connected to the religious law, right? So what does this mean now? I'm driving down the street, okay, in Malaysia, and the police pulls me over. It is not just a pragmatic thing that I'm doing, it is a religious obligation. That policeman is given authority to pull me over. Alhamdulillah, in Malaysia, nobody ever pulls you over, right? So you don't see police basically where I live. Very much so it's like England, but it's not like America. America is a very interesting place, right? So anyway, so here this man pulls me over and he says, "Can I see your driver's license?" I am morally obliged to do that, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man أطاع من أطاعني فقد أطاع الله ومن عصاني فقد عصى الله." Whoever obeys me has obeyed Allah, and whoever disobeys me has disobeyed Allah. Okay, that makes sense. You're the messenger of Allah. And whoever, he says, وَمَنْ أَطَاعَ الْأَمِيرَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَنِي وَمَنْ عَصَى الْأَمِيرَ فَقَدْ عَصَانِي أو كما قال. Whoever obeys the ruler, the Amir, has obeyed me, and whoever disobeys the person in charge has disobeyed me. So now there is this moral obligation. The police that just pulled me over, his authority comes from the head of police or whatever it is, his boss, from the head of police. Where does that come from? From the government. Where does that come from? From the King of Malaysia. Oh, okay. So if I don't pull over when the policeman tells you to do that, I'm disobeying the King of Malaysia himself. And if I'm disobeying the King of Malaysia himself, I'm disobeying the Prophet ﷺ himself. If I'm disobeying the Prophet ﷺ, I'm disobeying Allah. So it's moral obligation, as opposed to in another country, right? A non-Muslim country. That's a pragmatic obligation, not a moral obligation, right? So you want to get yourself trouble? You want to cause trouble for other Muslims and other things? Yeah, don't pull over if you want to. So we would say, so this Muslim, he said, well, I'm not obliged to. So then he just, instead of stopping, he starts driving 200 miles an hour. So we're going to say, is that safe to drive 200 miles an hour and to start, dodging the police? It's not safe. Is that wise? It's not wise. So it's not safe and therefore haram, and unwise and possibly therefore haram, right? But it's from a different point of view, as opposed to if you can imagine, you know, it is not unwise because no policeman would ever stop you for it, right? Let's say, for example, there's a brand new road in the middle of nowhere, and I know there's nobody there. There is nobody on this road whatsoever. There are no policemen, and I know that. And I'm in a non-Muslim country, and it is illegal to go through a red light. But I know 120% there is no policeman that's going to stop me, and there's nobody there. I just drive through the red light. Is that because it breaks the law? Is that immoral? No, it's not. Whereas in a Muslim country, if you break the law, it's immoral. Why? Because of the veins of authority, right? With some exceptions. So its field, so it mentions things that they can do, etc. And he goes through these kind of things. What are they in charge of, and specifics, and da 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 da. Okay. Anyhow, witness, market supervision, right? So controlling the market, that's important. Making sure that things are done properly, right? So this in general, this is what we don't see, right? This is what we see when you go to the Muslim world today. This is what you see. So it says, for instance, the person in charge of the market, prohibits the obstruction of roads. He prohibits porters and boatmen to carry too heavy loads, right? So this is something, if you go to the Middle East, right, or if you go to the Muslim world, it's a bit of a cultural shock because there's no rule of law and everything is crazy. That is not Islamic. That is just because it's in a cultural and civilizational lull, right? So the idea that it's okay, it's okay we're in Pakistan, you can break the law. It's okay we're in, whatever, Libya, you can break the law, That's indicative of the decay of society, right? But here we're seeing, for example, like no, like things like, oh, by the way, sir, you're not actually allowed to have that many things on your car. It's like, oh, so the kind of thing that you see, like, really bad driving cars that are very dangerous, driving in dangerous ways. He forbids porters and boatmen to carry too heavy loads. That's a classic thing you're going to see, right? You're driving through India, 50,000 kids holding onto this bus. Like, that's actually dangerous. Because it's dangerous, it should be forbidden. But hey, we don't care. So that's not Islamic. That's just how things are now because it's on a civilizational low. That's all, right? But that is not something that is supposed to be there, right? So having laws and the rule of law and people actually making sure that people don't do crazy stuff and it's not dangerous, right? He prevents teachers in schools and others from beating young pupils too much, right? Whereas that's exactly what happens in many Muslim countries, right? Um, Etc. Okay, makes sense. Where was the mint? Bribery, etc. Right? These kind of things. The mint, of course, right? So printing money, right? That's obviously something that is pretty important. And so you find that in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, there's a section like the fatwa of early Medinan Surah saying you cannot cut a silver coin. Okay, why not? It's just my money, right? I own a silver coin. This is mine, right? So just like in America, right? On Instagram, I'm shredding $100 bills and saying, "Hi Trump, sue me," right? That's actually illegal, right? Like you cannot shred $100 bills because that's you're affecting the economy. There's something like that you don't you can spend it, but you can't shred it, right? So cutting up minted coins or minted printed dollars. This is a you're messing with the whole financial system. You can't do that. So similarly, in the Muslim under the Muslim, he's going to print. You're going to have gold, for example, the dinar printed or whatever it is. This is something important. You can't just do it. You can't print it yourself, and you cannot desecrate it, right? Because it's part of the system there. So he's going to go through the titles, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Running out of time. He's going to go on to tangents as well about how that was for the Jews and the Christians, and then the wazir, doorkeeper, Ministry of Financial Operations and Taxation, Ministry of Official Correspondence and Writing. These are all these different things that we don't need to talk about. The police, he goes on to again. Um, he's just trying to talk about these things. Different importance ranks of the sword and the pen. These are different things. Trumpets and banners, right? So these are kind of like, you know, I remember in Jordan they would have they have their military bands and things like that. The mint, seal, large tent symbols. Like this. So we got 41. Injustice brings the ruin of civilization. Where is this? So this should be way later. About fighting. Okay, I'm gonna look three things before this. Should be on 41. Where is this? Yeah. 41. So injustice brings about the ruin of civilization. There we go, right? So attacks on people's property remove the incentive to acquire and gain property. Welcome to California. People then become of the opinion that the purpose and ultimate destiny of acquiring is to have it taken from them. The extent and degree to this property rights are infringed upon determines the extent and degree to which the efforts of the subjects to acquire property slacken. When attacks on property are extensive and general, or communism, right? So if you know that there's no point, I'm not gonna. If I earn lots of money, it's not going to be mine. So what's the point? Affecting all means by making a livelihood business too becomes general. If the attacks upon property are but light, the stoppage of general activity is correspondingly light. Civilization and its well-being, as well as business prosperity, depend on productivity. Right? What's the phrase? Uh, like how are you gonna is it productive, right? And people's efforts in all directions in the interest, right? So this is it, right? You don't feel a sense of unity, and you know that your rights are going to be taken. You're going to be taxed too heavily, or people are going to come and steal your property. So what's the point? People no longer do business in order to make a living, and then they cease all gainful activity, and business of civilization slumps, right? The dollar goes down when no one's investing in the dollar anymore, and economy, everything decays. People scatter everywhere in search of sustenance, and places outside the jurisdiction of their present government. People leave the country. The population of the particular region becomes sparse, settlements become empty, etc. And so he's talking about this happening in different times, and all these kind of things that happen, right? And we also mentioned that last week about the whole issue. One of these signs of the end of a civilization was heavy taxation, right? Heavy taxation. Um, okay, we'll skip some of these things. Where's 42? How it happens that access to ruler becomes restricted to the dynasty, right? Such restriction becomes important when the dynasty grows senile, right? So what we say is like the only way you can become a ruler is if you're from this family, right? So the beginning dynasty is remote from royal aspirations. It needs group feeling through which its power and dominion can be materialized. And the desert attitude is the characteristic of the group, as we mentioned, right? You're used to dealing with difficulties. You can deal with war. You can deal with no electricity. You are and you share your authority, right? The dynasty based upon religion is remote from royal aspirations. Da, 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 da. Now, if a dynasty at the beginning of its run is Bedouin one, the ruler possesses austerity and desert attitude. He is close to the people and easily accessible. Then, when his power is firmly established, he comes to claim all the glory for himself. He needs to keep people away keep away from people and remain aloof with his friends in order to be able to talk with them in his private affairs, since his following has now become too large. Therefore, he seeks to keep away from the people, etc., and becomes this elite, right? The first entrance restriction. So if you look at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people just walk into your house, right? So Surah Al-Hujurat, Doctor, what's his name? Uh, Doctor, I forget his name now. Author of The End of the Jihad State. Can't remember his name. But he was just mentioning the point, like if you just as a historical record, Surah Al-Hujurat. Surah Al-Hujurat says the Prophet ﷺ is living basically in a hut, okay? And so you can just talk through his wall. So don't do that. Right? So that's the picture. Like the rule of the Muslims, you can just talk through his wall. So don't do that. Right? Wait till he comes out. Right? Fast forward, okay? Suddenly now we have to protect these rulers, suddenly this, suddenly that. And now basically you have no access, right? No access to people, right? So the first entrance restriction or originated in the days of Muawiyah and Abdul Malik and the Umayyads, right? And then it continued thereon, right? Division of one dynasty into two, that's something else. I'm going to skip that. Once seniality has come upon a dynasty, it cannot be warded off. We have already cited the symptoms and causes of seniality. Um, Senality, how I pronounce it, one by one. Da, da, da. Many politically conscious person among the people of the dynasty becomes alert to it and notices the symptoms and causes of senility that have affected its dynasty. He considers it possible to make this senility disappear. Therefore, he takes it upon himself to repair the dynasty and relieve its temper of senility. He supposes that it resulted from shortcomings or negligence on the part of da 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 da. That is not so. These things are natural to the dynasty. Customs that have developed prevent him from repairing it, right? So that happened, for example, if you read what's it called in the morning hours, I think it's called Muhammad Marmaduke Pickthall. He has a book about the end of the Ottoman Empire. It's a novel, a very sad novel. It's called in the morning hour, right? Duha, right? In the morning hour or in the morning hours. So you see basically Ottoman Turks that are pro the Sultan and against Sultan. They're actually friends, but they're basically trying to fix things from different sides. Those who have this idea that we can fix it from the inside, and those who say we can't fix it from the inside. They're both positive and they both have good ideas and they're both trying to fix things, but from inside or from outside. Do we get rid of the current thing or do we try and fix it? Right? And you see this, like it can't be fixed because there's too many things in place that just can't be fixed. Right? A person who, for instance, has seen his father and older members of his family wear silk and brocade and use gold ornaments for weapons, da 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 da, will not be able to diverge the customs of the forebearers. Right? They don't. They need basically. You need to get rid of these people. Um, okay. At the end of a dynasty, there often also appears some power that gives the impression that the seniority of this has been appear. It lights up brilliantly just before it extinguishes. Right. How disintegration befalls dynasties. Any royal authority must be built upon two foundations. The first is might, and the second is group feeling. Right? So notice Animal Farm. The animals had the strength to get rid of the farmer because he was drunk and wasn't running things, right? So they had the might and they had the camaraderie, right? That whole thing that we're all animals, right? And all animals are equal, right? Which finds its expressions in soldiers, right? They are one unit. They are not hitmen, right? The second is money, which supports the soldiers and provides the whole structure needed for by royal authority, right? So in Animal Farm, the animals run the farm and they have access to the food, right? So disintegration befalls the dynasty at these two foundations, right? So it runs out of money and it runs out of, so he says, what is it? That might and group feeling. Doesn't have the group feeling, doesn't have the might, right? So obviously we have to go and steal oil from other countries, whatever it is, and things to keep money, etc. Yeah, general advice you gave for community work was to work to fix a half-built system and cooperate and not to break one. That's good. But what does Ibn Khaldun say about fuqaha and religious scholars? He says that they're the worst politicians because they're naive. We're basically too high-minded. So someone like myself would never be a politician and would never build a country because we're too nice and we're too naive and we're too high-minded. So I can talk to you, Aman, and say, yeah, but basically, you know, you need somebody who's a bit of a son of a gun in some way, right? Somebody who's got something else, right? Or divine intervention, right? You know, you need something else there. So yes, morally, I agree, right? But he's talking descriptively, not prescriptively. He's not saying what would be the good thing to do. The good thing to do is try and fix Muslim countries. That's true. But he's saying descriptively, it's not going to work, right? Prescriptively, you should go and talk to this kafir and try and convince him to become Muslim. Descriptively, it might not work. Does that make sense, Aman? So this book is not about what you should do. This book is what happens. He's saying this is what we've seen civilizations do. Right? There's a difference. So there's a difference what you should be trying to do versus what will happen. Right? So that one of the Salaf, he said, listen, he said, he said, imagine that you are guarding a castle, okay? And this castle is called Islam. Do what you need to do, that do things that if everybody else did it, the castle will be protected. This fort will be protected, right? Irrespective whether they're going to do that or not. So you say, what do if everybody did this, if everybody did what I'm doing, then this fort would be protected. Okay, that's what you should do. Don't leave your post and do the things that if you did it and everyone else did it, it would work. Acknowledging the fact that everyone else has left their posts and they're not doing it. Does that make sense? So you're going to go and call the adhan, but no one's going to come. You can still call the adhan, right? One of Sheikh Faraz Rabbani's teachers in Damascus, he says إنما أدرس تأثما. He says I teach in order to not be labeled sinful, but I don't have any students. He might be teaching himself, who knows? Like I don't have anybody to teach, but I do. Like if everybody did what I'm doing, this thing would continue. So khalas, that's what I'm going to do, right? What does the Muhammad Sadiq is here, right? In the military, like every single morning you shave. Okay, what's the point? I don't even know where my platoon is. In the morning you shave. That's what you do, right? That's what you do. You do what you've always done. Okay, but I don't know where the rest of the platoon is. I'm run out of food. I don't even know where I am, and I'm gonna die. Why am I shaving? What's the point? So that's what you do, right? You just keep on going, right?
It's the little things.
The little things, right? You keep doing those things, right? Your marriage is going down, 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 down. You don't know what to do. You make dua. You do the small things that you try and do. Right? Kids going lost. Kids getting worse, worse, and worse. Right? Masjid's falling apart. Everything's falling apart. You don't know what's going on. Everything's falling apart. You just keep doing what you need to do. Right? If everybody else did, like if everybody else was doing this thing, it would work. You keep doing those things. Right? You keep doing those things. So it is important. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about what actually happens. He's not talking about what you should do. These are two different things, right? Just like we said, for example, basically civilizations are often based on savages, people who are not that moral. They take over and they kill everybody. So descriptively, that is usually what happens, right? But that doesn't make it right, does it? We're not talking. There's two different things, right? Okay. So he says we shall mention the first disintegration that comes about through might and group feeling, and then it says dynasty can be founded and established only with the help of the group feeling. There must be a major group feeling uniting all the people. The United States of America, right? You got to be one. This major group feeling is the family tribal group feeling peculiar to the ruler. When the national luxury of the royal authority makes its appearance in a dynasty, and when people who share in the group feeling are humiliated, and the first to be humiliated are the members of the royal family and his relatives who share with him, right? There is much more humiliated than anyone else. Moreover, luxury has a greater hold on them than anyone else, because so basically they're kicked out. Thus, two agents of destruction surround them: luxury and force. The use of force eventually leads to their being killed. They become sick at heart when they see that the ruler firmly established in authority. His envy of them then changes to fear for his royal authority. Therefore, he starts to kill and humiliate them and deprive them of prosperity and luxury, to which they become. So again, the whole thing in America, again, it's just America is just an easy, it's just easier to see than other places, is making sure that everybody thinks that they live in Hollywood, right? So we all live in Hollywood, right? And we're all cool, right? That's the whole thing. Is just keep making everybody think that they share in the glory. But as soon as they realize that they don't, that's when it all falls apart, right? So you gotta keep doing this thing like, oh no, we're all wealthy, and we're all doing this, right? And this, it's that keeping that keeping the imagine the what's the word? Keeping that lie as one, right? That's very important, right? Um, okay, the illusion. Thank you. Right? It's places. Okay. So these things happen. The ruler thus isolates himself from his family and helpers. who have natural affection for him. This is sensed by the people of other groups. Very naturally, they become audacious vis-a-vis the ruler. Da, 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 da. The ruler destroys them and persecutes, kills them one after another. Later, people of the dynasty follow the tradition, etc. And it goes on and on and on. And basically, he just destroys himself, right? Like Macbeth, kind of same kind of picture, and many scenarios. Exactly. So here there's other things that so I mean there's other things that work here, right? So one of the key factors in the West today and not on the world today is that we live in a what's a world? That we live in a Huxleyan world. Huxleyan world is I get drunk. I just have on my phone. I have enough pleasure to do things, right? So that in the book, Huxley's book, Brave New World, it's like whenever there's problem, you just go to pleasure, right? So it's like as long as I can see attractive women, as long as I can listen to music, as long as I can get drunk enough, right? It's okay. Like don't question things, right? So that's that, and I saw that with my own eyes, right? Alhamdulillah, it's changed, but like arguably England went into Iraq by virtue of topless women. So this is what I saw at school, right? I'm 11, 12, 13, that kind of age. And there's a newspaper, The Sun, right? The newspaper, The Sun, somebody familiar with, right? Owned by the same Fox News people, right? And back in those days, it's stopped now, alhamdulillah, but back in those days, page three of The Sun was a topless woman. So this is how you would talk to the people. The newspaper cost 10 pence, which is cheap, right? And even kids would buy it. And it says, bomb bin Laden, bomb Iraq. And then you turn the page and there's a half topless woman, right? Like every single day. So every builder, every working class people, that is the newspaper that you buy, and that is how you get the message across. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, they don't do that anymore, I was told, right? Maybe newspapers, well, people nobody buys newspapers anymore, but that's how it works, right? So that's quite a different kind of order of business, right? Where you kind of basically, it's like really low, like the newspaper is stupid and it's just it's like what is it called you just like message sexual stimulus, so then it must be true because it's conjoined with the sexual stimulus. It's very very low, right? And similar things with Fox News. I think they did that, removing the table from in front of the presenter so they can see her legs, things like that. That's very kind of low, right? But to a great extent, that's how we function. Is that, listen, I have a nice car. As long as I have a nice car, as long as I can watch TV, I can watch the game, I can buy a soda and get a Big Mac, I'm doing good. When you start challenging, I can't have a nice car, I can't buy a Big Mac anymore, I can't have any soda, I don't see any attractive women, then hang on a minute, something's off, right? Like something's off, right? And even in the past, the phrase in English we have was it, bread and circuses, right? Bread and circuses is a phrase in Latin, which is, I don't know how you say in Latin, but like basically, how do you control people? Feed them more food and give them more entertainment, right? So that's the Huxleyan world. Is that it's a bit more, it's kind of different to what he's talking about. Is that I'm just involved in my own individual low pleasures, and as long as they're not challenged, I really don't care about who's bombed and who isn't. It's not really relevant to me, right? But if you turn the internet off, oh my God, that'll be crazy, right? But again, as we mentioned last week, in that second stage of civilization, your people are they don't have that initial um, will to change things. So they're very obedient and they will just accept things. So even if they talk, they are not actually going to go and, storm the White House. They're not going to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like they wouldn't do it. They'd be like, they're just trained to be submissive, right? That's that second stage of civilization. So the idea that the multiple qadis ijtihad cooperating is not feasible long term. Uh, we'll talk about that somewhere else. That's a kind of fit discussion. Yeah, okay. Um, So this may be exemplified by the Arab Muslim dynasty. At the beginning, it reached as far as Spain, India, and China. The Umayyads had complete control of all the Arabs through the group feeling of Abd Manaf. It was also possible for da 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 da, da and eventually it fell apart for the same reason. So why? What was the basis of the Abbasids? The Abbasids are like, you guys are wrong. Okay, there's oppression happening in the Umayyads. Okay, and they're not and the power is not shared, and the non-Arabs are not included, even though they're majority. And so we Abbasids, we're going to come, and we are also relatives of the Prophet ﷺ, right? Through Abbas, and we have a better right, and we're going to bring justice, right? So everyone's going to be included, right? So that's basically how they took over, and with other things as well. Okay, let's try and find so just 40, where is 40? Tax. Do we skip 40? Authority expands to its limit and then it's narrowed down to successive stages until this dissolves. That's 46. 48. Dynasty gains domination over the ruling dynasty through perseverance and not through sudden action. Right? China, right? This is what's happening right now with China, right? A new dynasty gains domination over the ruling dynasty through perseverance and not through sudden action. Right? I think that's what we're seeing, bit by bit. Allahu Alam. That's again my opinion. There is overpopulation at the end of dynasties. Pestilence and famine frequently occur then, right? Overpopulation, that's something else. Human civilization requires political leadership for its organization, that's something else. The Mahdi and opinions about that. So he has an interesting opinion about the Mahdi. I don't think he believes in the Mahdi, by the way. He thinks it's like a Shi'i invention, which is not true at all. Um, so he considers it to be kind of like a made up thing or something like that, which is not. I mean, it's almost mutawatir. So it says another way, such as a Fatimid who would make up propaganda about Mahdi, and they have this whole thing about the Mahdi, like it's yeah. So anyway, so he's talking about forecasting future dynasties and nations, including a discussion of predictions and an exposition of the subtle arts. And okay, that's something else. So you can have a quick idea there. Um, and that's basically that chapter. And then he goes on to chapter 4. Okay, so chapter 4, again, um, in the group description, I have the file there, and it mentions specific chapters. So now we finished the whole discussion of civilizations. There's a lot more to be said there, and we kind of rushed through a lot of things. But we're going to go specifically into crafts, knowledges, and Islamic knowledge. Okay, that's 2 lessons, inshallah ta'ala. So jazakum khair, everybody. It's been emotional as ever, and forgive my shortcomings. Inshallah, we'll stop here. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.